a lot of people said that I failed. They viewed it as a failure in my life when those 8 years were done because I didn't make any money. From a worldly sense, there was no value. If anything, it disturbed some people where they thought that I really should, walk away. However, I saw the value. The value was I was actually becoming a human being.
The first person we lead is ourself. Welcome to Because This Matters, a podcast about leading from the inside out. I'm Mark Poise, and in each conversation we explore how values take shape and become action, how people with clarity navigate change, challenge, and growth with intention. My guest today is Alison Krebs. Alison's life has moved through a series of profound reinventions. She began her career as part of the early team at Conseco, helping grow the company into a Fortune 500 and then Fortune 200 organization. In 1999, she entered recovery and made the decision to walk away from that life entirely, trading an executive role and lakefront home for a much simpler path and a season of deep personal and spiritual exploration. That path led her into sacred music within the Catholic Church and eventually into becoming a spiritual director after time spent in a Benedictine monastery. And then, during a silent retreat, she experienced a moment of clarity that would shift everything, a calling to front a hard rock band. That calling led her to Nashville, where she now leads Rock Alley and The Addiction, a band that has toured internationally and received Grammy considerations. In this conversation, Alison reflects on the values that have shaped each chapter of her life, from success and surrender to purpose, faith, and creative expression. Alison, I truly appreciate you making the time to be here with me today. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Mark. I was just thrilled when you did.
Oh gosh, we're going to have a really great discussion today because people will already have a sense for the journey. You are someone who's had so many stops already along this journey, and I'm sure they're going to be fascinated to hear how values have driven that and impacted it. So now that I've told them a bit about what you have done, what values drive you today where you stand in this process of life?
What a great question. Today is much different than the past. Today, the values that drive me are humility. That was a surprise that came into my life. Community. All those questionnaires you check off, I never checked off community as being important to me. However, all of a sudden in my life, it is. Achievement is still very important to me, and excellence. I don't do very many things, but the very few things that I do, I like to be great at them. So it takes me a very long time just to do, one thing.
I'm thinking about how humility and achievement and excellence go together. That's a balance that might be difficult for some, maybe even counterintuitive to some. How could you speak to how those interplay for you?
Well, let me think. I believe that in my past, I was very controlling, and it was sort of like I was in charge. And I was achieving, and I had to do this, and a lot of I's. And then as I got, as I fell into really confusing and difficult bottoms in my life, I had to realize that that wasn't working. And I had to find, some people call it God. There's very lovely many names out there. I call it God. I had to find why in the world that what I was doing was not working, and I knew it should be. And so I had to get out of the way and allow these powers that are much greater than I into my life. And being in recovery, you hear the term higher power a lot. I now have thousands and thousands of higher powers that drive my days. And so that would make me need to stay in humility. So no matter what happens, I believe everything is perfectly crafted for each one of us. And so no matter what's coming at me, that's the good. It's not what I think is good or bad. And so I welcome all the weirdness and lovely things that are sent to me to be able to achieve and be excellent at what I feel I was put on the earth to do, you know? So why wouldn't these higher powers help me do what I'm supposed to do and be here for? Yeah. And so that requires the last item, the community. If I don't have, I mean, I don't have a village, Mark. I have villages that help Alison. You know, I need so much help with everything.
That's such a really profound concept that if I were to try to distill it, it's basically that it sounds like humility now allows the achievement. It's not like you achieve and you also try to stay humble, but through a starting point of humility, achievement, excellence, and community all arise.
Mm, well said.
Is that on track with how you see this unfolding in your day to day?
Yeah. In getting ready to talk to you, I'm like, oh, I hope he doesn't ask me the definition of humility because I've never been able to come up with one. You know, I've heard many, you know, but it's so, you know, beyond my grasp of being able to define even. Um, However, someone sent me something the other day. I'll just quote the first line: perpetual quietness of heart. So, being the devout Catholic that I am and being consecrated to Mary, I often look at her and how she lived. Um, she always pondered everything. She never reacted to anything. And so to me, if I had to define humility, it's forever pondering, like, ooh, look at this lovely thing that came into my life, whether it's, you know, some health problem or, you know, a car, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm not judging it.
Yeah. This notion, I wonder for some of our listeners that are not so connected to religious traditions, could you speak to what it means to you to be consecrated to Mary? I realize that you just said, "Oh, I don't know how to define humility exactly in a way that I love it," so I hope not. I'm not putting too much pressure there. But could you explain to someone that has no concept of that what it means and what it looks like in your life to do that?
You bet. Thank you for asking. If I could give a little bit of background,
Sure, always.
in 2004, all of a sudden, someone paid for me to go to the Holy Land. So I went on this pilgrimage, and I was in somewhat early recovery then. I went into recovery in 99. So '04, I was still trying to find my way through life, you know, and, I went to the Holy Land and I was in discernment to become a nun at that time. And I, everywhere I went in the Holy Land, I was told that it was not meant to be. And I was very sad because I really wanted to do that, you know? And so I, I finally realized that it was my yes that was important and that it was still not what I was supposed to do with my daily life. So I came back, and what entered my life was the consecration to Mary through St. Louis de Montfort. And it's a consecration that many, many, many people do, regardless of where they are in their life, where you actually turn over all of your life, all of your heart, your thoughts, your mind, your spirituality, your good deeds of the day, your prayer even is turned over to her. Looking at Mary, she's like the closest to God. And so she takes whatever you have and she makes it more beautiful and better. And so that intermediary entity is a little confusing for some people. I sort of liken it to, you know, if you were connected to certain people in Nashville, for example, Mark, which I know you are, and I sort of know these people. However, you really know these people. I go to you to help me go to them. And so that's her role in my life.
Yeah, and that's funny because it raises once again that idea of community, that she shows up in your life as a presence that connects you to this, closer to this community. Also, this podcast has already explored quite a bit with some guests about how values evolve and shift over time, and you in particular are someone that has very distinctive, it might seem to a listener, chapters to your life. The decades in corporate, high performing, really high impact in the business world things, and then time in recovery through that journey. Would you walk us maybe through how your values have shifted through these different time periods, and both the chronology and also how it feels and how your day to day might be different?
I loved the corporate world. I loved how it smelled. I loved everything about it. And it was since I was heavily using drugs and alcohol most of my life, it was a place where I was safe and that I didn't do that. I was able to do the right thing when I was in the corporate world. So it was like a safe haven for me until I left the doors again, And I I value that time in my life more than I can say. It My life was very driven by approval and control and fun. So if I wasn't working, which I was usually working 24/7, I was making sure I was having fun and getting you to like me. It was very important for me. It was so important to me that you liked me. And it was really, I wonder if I was so successful in the corporate world because I figured if I was a senior executive, you had to like me. You had to be nice to my face anyway.
Yeah, this is the price of entry to enter the orbit of Alison, the leader.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? And the control, just I was in charge of everything, and you liked me and I was sure of it, and I didn't have any other life. I sort of had my religion a little bit. I didn't have any family. I was the power-driven girl. Interestingly, when I went into recovery, when I hit a very ugly bottom, very close to death, I left the corporate world after about 2 years in recovery, and I had two options. I could have a presidency position in New York City to build a global call center, or by the Classy Poodle with a K and an IE, Classy Poodle, which was a dog boarding and grooming salon. And I chose the Classy Poodle. I chose to get out of the way for once in my life. And I'd never owned a dog. I didn't know anything about breeds or grooming. I'd never heard of a grooming salon that I recalled. Um, and I love groomers. However, I will tell you, Mark, they do not listen to any type of hierarchy person in any way, shape, or form. So I went from everybody listening to me into an environment where nobody listened to me and no one really liked me, to be honest. I was, lost. And through a lot of urine and a lot of washing, and about 2 years in, I told God, I said, "Oh, this has been lovely. Thank you for all this humility and healing, that these dogs have brought me, and these groomers and clients, and cleaning, lots of manual labor. And interestingly, dog grooming made that show, the toughest jobs in America. Are you familiar with that show?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's because we have to clean out anal glands of the dogs.
As a dog lover, I am familiar with what you speak.
Right? That'll wake you up. And just to close that time period, so God assured me that that was lovely that I had done those 2 years, but we needed to do 8 years. So it's like the Karate Kid here. I did the park, I did these couple cars, and then the master shows him the parking lot full of cars that needed to be done. And I really was, I was a mess. And so I needed, not that I still don't have to work on it every second of every day. However, I needed a master class in humility. And that dog boarding and grooming salon really helped me do that.
8 years of a master class in humility. And I hear your clarity that you had to do it, that this was the step for you, that was an offering. A lot of people would not maybe tell the same narrative about that period of time. What's different about the way you tell the story and predominant ways that other people talk about those points in their own life?
What a great question. A lot of people said that I failed. They viewed it as a failure in my life when those 8 years were done, because I didn't make any money. I didn't make any progress. It was a simple dog boarding and grooming salon with a lot of dogs in my bed every night of all different breeds staring at me, going, "This girl needs help." Uh, from a worldly sense, there was no value. If anything, it disturbed some people where they thought that I really should, walk away. However, I saw the value. The value was I was actually becoming a human being and seeing, and that's when the invitation to become consecrated came. Invitations that were given to me my whole life, I wasn't able to see because I was too busy winning and conquering the world. I was now able to start seeing the spiritual fourth dimension realm, which is far more exciting to live in. So the values that 8 years gave me, there's no, you can't get that. You can't read something and get it. You have to live it. Yeah.
The story that you tell of even the corporate leader, high achiever version of Allison sounds like someone with a lot of clarity. Did she have clarity back then?
She thought so.
Yeah. Could you speak to what I'm hearing is there is clarity throughout, because some people will say, "Oh, I didn't have any clarity until this point of my life." But it sounds like your relationship with, and even maybe definition of clarity has shifted over time. Could you speak to the evolution of that itself in your life?
I clearly wanted people to like me. That was my drive. So that was clear to me. Actually, that's not true. Actually, it wasn't until I had a lot of people come and help me in recovery. I couldn't see that I was driven by you wanting to like me. Actually, I did not see that. And actually, all my actions, even doing something nice for you, like taking you out to lunch, was still something I was getting out of it. So the motives weren't there. However, I clearly wanted to win and get promoted on a constant basis. I loved to work, and that was clear to me. I enjoy it. And a lot of people sort of look at their prior life to recovery and their current life. And I think real recovery happens when the two mold together. You only have one life. It's not old me and new me and or bad Allison and good Allison. It's all wonderful. I love shadow history Allison. I love her. And so the clarity, I guess, was doing the best I possibly could have been doing at the time.
I hear that sense of integration you have, and no resistance to the past, and the story that you just raised, the perspective that you're telling one story of Allison, and that it's not so much chapters like I've been alluding to from my part of our conversation. These are all one thing, the you that has lived and continues to live. Could we pivot to talk about how values show up in your work? I know you support others in the recovery process and also as spiritual director. How do values show up there, both yours and others in the process?
I would say that's pretty much all that shows up. Because once you remove whatever is going on, and so many of my mentors, my lovely life coach, my sponsor, my spiritual director, my voice teacher, all those lovely entities in my life that help me, my husband, I'd say the biggest value that they're giving me is they're removing what's in the way. And so when you get into recovery and start making these changes in your life, you're starting to remove what was in the way. And therefore, it's really values that show up, or like control is a huge problem for all of us. You know what I mean? And that can be written as a value. And it is valuable because it gets us to see what we've been doing in our life. So I see it as a value. And you can use it as a value or not so much as a value. Some of my biggest weaknesses, or whatever you want to call them, are also my greatest strengths. I just have to get out of the way, though. Yeah, that famous saying, God is strongest in our weakness. It just never made sense to me. You know what I mean? I don't get it. However, the more I can get out of the way, then I'm strongest.
Your strength comes when you get out of the way. There's so much clarity, and I hear the humility through it also. It's like, it's not I know this because I figured it out. It's sort of sounds like I know this because this is what's here. And I'm here with it. It raises a notion that I'm kind of interested to see what comes up. What are you willing to be wrong about?
Everything. Yeah. Daily or weekly, Mark? I that was the other thing I was really battling, because I was raised in a very strict religion, very dualistic point in the Catholic Church where everything was right and wrong. And, it was really, everything was about doctrine instead of love. And so I had to become, I was also brought up that there's this only one possible way on each and everything in life, and this is how it was. And so when I went into recovery, bringing to that again, I was very much, there was no Alison there. I was just all these false things that people had told me, and I didn't really understand them anyway. So I didn't have any of my own thinking, and my thinking got really distorted. And so I had to not know anything about anything to get better. I was listening to this Carmelite monk the other day. He spent his whole life in prayer. I mean, in silence, in prayer. And he said, "Oh, I can't tell you anything about prayer. I mean, I can't," he said. He was convinced of it. I cannot. I don't even know if I'm in prayer, he said. I have no idea. And so I think the great spiritual mystics and people that I study and look at, they don't know more and more and more and more. It's not the opposite. So
Yeah. Well, something I'll throw out there for the audience too is that you were the person who gifted me the book The Cloud of Unknowing, which what an apropos title to this part of our conversation. Unknowing instead of knowing.
well said. What a book, huh?
Oh yeah,
If anyone
absolutely.
is listening, that's
Yes.
the book.
Yeah. How do you notice and how do you adjust when you get off track from the unknowing clarity that you've been describing?
I'm off track now a little bit in my life. Yeah. I can feel just a little step off. I'm thinking a little bit too much, or maybe way too much. I'm back to, I have to figure it out. Um, I'm not doing just basic things that I know that I have to do to keep my thinking straight. And keeping Alison out of the way so I can live in this. I mean, this life we're given is so beautiful and so wonderful. You can't even explain it. It's just, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? And the gifts that we're given and the awarenesses, and it's just, oh my goodness. And so that sort of, my energy drops, a lot of I's in my sentences, and I'm off to the races again.
What are the things that help bring you back, whether it's activities or practices, reflections, when you notice those things in yourself?
When I want to get back on track, and sometimes that takes way longer than you would think. I could feel I'm off track but I'm going to sit there a little longer. Sometimes we hear I'm getting something out of it still. I don't know, but I, to get back onto track for me, I go into very, very basic things. So, um, the the communities that I tend to be a part of, the Catholic Church 12-step program, spiritual direction communities. And I find myself being still more, going to church more. I pray the rosary every day, go to a lot of 12-step meetings, and sort of immerse myself back into the spiritual world for a period of time until I'm a little bit more stable.
Hmm. I can't help but to notice that you sort of, after sharing community as one of your core values, you just effectively told me that that's exactly what brings you back when you feel you're getting a little bit out.
Glad you noticed that, Mark.
Was that a conscious shift, or is am I just noticing the pattern that you shared about what you know you need to do?
No, it was not a conscious shift. Yeah. I was just trying to figure out what am I doing right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
There's a tool, that Enneagram, that you and I have talked about too, and going into really studying our different personalities, etc. That seems to be something that really helps me if I go back to the basics. That's very helpful.
yeah, yeah. The Enneagram, it's a very interesting sort of personality assessment. If I were to just put it into a container, perhaps unfairly, one of the many things about it that's interesting is it doesn't treat us as fixed. It sort of acknowledges that when we're in good alignment, we might exhibit more of these characteristics in a direction. And when we're in not such good alignment, we might exhibit more of these characteristics. Could you share anything either about yourself or maybe more general about the Enneagram that people would like to know relating to that?
Mm. It is so well done. When I first started seeing that, it was just so impressive. It really, some of the Enneagram books that I read really helps me see where I am. So if I'm thinking I'm not growing at all, or I'm way grown over here, it might help me see, like, oh no, I really have quite a ways to go before I can get into the mature number, that I'm looking forward to. It's just how we all interconnect, just thinking about community again and how everything touches on everything else is quite fascinating.
We haven't touched at all yet about the direction you've been in recent years as a singer of a hard rock band. How do these things show up in the process of performing for you?
When I perform, I feel like I have literally walked into heaven. And I get to remain there for some period of time. And then I have to walk back out. And I mean, oh my goodness. It, I think one of the reasons is just my story of getting there. I really had been in discernment to become a nun. And then I find out that that is not meant to be. And I was really heartbroken. On, and I did become consecrated to Mary, and I became a trained spiritual director with the Benedictine nuns, who brought in all different religions to train me, which I thank them to this day. On the silent retreat of the final retreat to the spiritual direction internship, I could finally see why I was placed on the face of this earth. And so call it heaven. When I perform, that is when it links back up to that awareness of why I was put on this darn earth in the first place. So I did spend 16 years in going from that awareness and working at getting onto that stage, and didn't realize that was going to happen. I didn't realize that that connection was going to happen, and it did.
What do you hope that your performances evoke in listeners or audiences that see it?
If I'm in heaven, and I'm not telling anyone anything, I'm not giving them any words. So I'm just sort of standing up there singing away. However, However, if I get myself out of the way again, which is how my voice teacher has trained me, he's doing the same thing. Every teacher that comes along in my life is removing Alison, removing Alison, removing Alison. So my voice teacher has me removing myself as well. So the people watching me or listening to me should really see some version of God. And so that's how heaven gets connected there.
A very mystical approach to performance. And I know some of our audience will be, like we acknowledged earlier, more familiar or less familiar with that, but that's what it sounds like to me. And it stands in contrast to what many people might have as preconceptions of a singer in a rock band. How is that received? Just would you be willing to speak to that? How you see this shake out with actual audiences? Do they get it? Are they surprised? Is there something else you see on their face?
I would say with the reaction to some of the people that I get to talk to, that it has nothing to do with my performance, that something else was going on with them. So it's not, oh, I really like your voice, or, you move, whatever performance wise. It's more crying or, or something else going on. And so I do see that there's extraordinary value to that unfolding.
Yeah. And that almost stands as an answer to a question I was going to have, which is the role of humility as a performer, specifically a front person of a rock band. And I hear you offering up right away that they're not actually responding to me. They're responding to something in themselves that has come up in the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well said, Mark.
Oh, I just repackaged, ever so slightly repackaged what you offered. So it's not my wisdom over here. When you look forward to the continued evolution of these chapters, or maybe whatever arises, are there certain things that you're expecting to see or hoping to see? When you look forward relating to values, what's on your mind?
Interestingly, thank you for asking me that question, because I don't know, it seems to be like bubbling out of me right now for some reason. You're going to laugh, because the two or three top values, they're going to loop back together again for me. Right now, I am more interested. I'm coming around after talking to you back into excellence and achievement. And I almost feel like this is a period where things are merging together, and I can now move forward again on achievement and excellence of what I need to achieve. I still feel there's an achievement coming ahead of me.
How do you prepare for that?
I meet with a life coach, and I'm still a lot to make sure I'm listening correctly. I am huge on discernment. Going from the calling to be a sister or a nun to a spiritual director to a hard rock front person, I really discerned about 10 years within that 16 years. And I use massive different ways to discern that I really am supposed to be going that direction. I feel like I'm back in a period of time where I'm discerning again the next achievements and excellence of,
Yeah.
and I could be wrong. I could be sent in a different direction. However, I personality wise, I'm thinking possibly not.
Yeah, this probably lies just over the horizon based on what I've learned so far. Yeah. If you had the world's attention for 30 seconds or so, what value would you advocate for that all of them would be better off in some way if they would adopt it for themselves?
Thank you for allowing me to even touch that question. I feel honored or something. I don't know. Can I answer too?
You can answer what your heart is screaming to answer.
Excellent. Thank you. Uh, I would say accountability has helped me so very much in my life. And it sort of touches on that approval and control versus being accountable to other people in my life to help me grow. It ends up, however, in love. If I would say the biggest change in helping me get any type of a beautiful life is learning how to love myself. You know, my mom said, you have to love people. And I had absolutely no idea how to do that. And then I created false methods of doing it. And then I convinced myself I was doing it. And, and then, and then, you know, the Great Awakening realized that I wasn't doing it in any way, shape, or form. And I didn't love myself at all. And so, as far as really learning to love myself, I cannot tell you what a beautiful life that is.
That's a really great pair that go together. Accountability being something that can be so concrete and so measured, and love of self, which is probably always going to be abstract because it's always internal facing. Also, what comes up for me as I hear them and think about their interaction, that's something that we can try to hold ourselves accountable to in any moment. Loving ourselves, having that love for ourselves, that each moment, each situation, each thought, each action offers a chance to be accountable to that vision. Do you have thoughts on that idea of how those might connect?
Yeah, that's well said. I was thinking. I don't know if I could have ever got to love myself if I didn't hold myself accountable. It would have been impossible because I always would have been right, or I always would have had the answer, or I always would have thought I already did that, or just checked off things and thought I did that already. So it's imperative for me that I had a lot of accountability to get there.
What do people, in your estimation, what do they often misunderstand about accountability or about self-love?
The director is what we call it in our 12-step programs. I'm going to direct my life, and I'm going to make you feel a certain way about me, and I'm going to direct the things that happen to me. And there's no accountability because it's all false. And so the self-love is false also. And you'll hear people at that point say, well, I love myself. I'm doing what's best for me. You know what I mean? But that's not really accurate.
I imagine that a reflective listener at this moment might be wondering, oh my gosh, is my accountability or my self-love a false one? What would you tell them to search for if they're concerned about that?
I love that question. Oh my goodness, that's fabulous. I'm going to loop back to a couple things. One, if there hasn't been a huge period of vulnerability, there's no possible way. So there has to be some view of things that have transpired or work that has been done. I feel like I honestly love myself, where I did not before. I did not think on much of a scale that I loved myself. It was more from a proud sense or bragging sense or defending sense. Well, I love myself.
I love that you offer up that idea of a filter that until you've gone through this filter, this part of a journey that involves vulnerability, we may not know for sure, and that in your own experience, you have not seen it arise until going through there.
Correct.
That's a wonderful thing people can apply to themselves.
Thank you. Yeah. I had a master class on non-vulnerability before that. And the pain when I allowed it to happen. Oh my goodness. And at levels that I had never even imagined.
Is there anything that you hoped we would touch on that we haven't touched on in our conversation?
I'm amazed how much we've touched on. I'm just so enjoyed. I'm just so enjoyed that I got to talk to you this morning. It's a big deal for me. I'm excited. I guess the only thing I'd like to talk about is I'm so excited to take this and move forward in my life. This has value to me. This is, that's the other thing. I didn't really ever talk about this stuff. And so I just imagined in my head that I was growing, and that's not how it works. It's just that it isn't, And so when I had to become vulnerable and start talking and showing that I was an infant at any possible value on any list, I had such a long way to go, and I was already way into adulthood. I will say I've so much farther to go. I mean, that's the cool thing about the spiritual world. There's no limits. I could spend 700 lifetimes and not touch where I get to go. And so I'm excited, and this has helped me move on. Because I'll hang myself up in a heartbeat, So thank you.
Thank you. And I love that you raised that idea that even within these type of conversations, having it yourself and thinking about it and ruminating maybe on it is one thing, but now you've brought it to, at least even between you and I, before any listeners, community. And you've spoken to how that is so central for you, and that it also helps bring you on track. So I hope that this serves you well as maybe a tiny micro boost in your process of getting on track, as you spoke to earlier.
Huge. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your generosity of time and sharing so openly about your path and what has been underneath it the whole time.
Thank you, Mark. You've been a huge help in my life.
Thank you. That's all for this episode of Because This Matters. I believe that these are conversations that matter. If something from this conversation spoke to you, please consider sharing it with someone. Maybe take a moment to like, rate, follow, or subscribe on your podcast platform of choice or on YouTube. You can learn more about my work as a coach and speaker at markpoise.com. Until next time, remember that a life aligned with values is a fulfilled one.